moving along with some other things on current conditions now and an outlook. One of the things that Laura talked about with the drought monitor that goes into it is soil moisture. But the input is modeled soil moisture. There are only very few soil moisture measurements around the country. We've got a couple in South Dakota that are still operating from part of our weather stations. We're trying to find the capital to add on and do that, and the resources to do that. We're still working on it. Until we have that point, and there are some rumblings in D.C. now about potential for USDA stepping in and trying to do something on measured soil moisture. This is the current soil moisture conditions it's a combination of different models. Basically, you're compared to average, difference from average. So the things that are in what looks like a gray or blue there are inches above average, and these are in millimeters, so you have to divide by 25 to get the inches. So the lightest is 1 to 2 inches above average. So we have pockets in eastern South Dakota that now are somewhat above average in the way of soil moisture. This pocket in northeastern South Dakota, it's got to be a model thing, because I can't see how much of anything in northeast South Dakota can still be considered dry from a soil moisture perspective. Southwestern South Dakota, we still have what could be, I think that I need to update that. The 4 to 6 is probably like a 2 to 4 at most inches of soil moisture deficit. Up to our north and west, lots of wet, and to our south, still lots of dry, and then the main part of the Corn Belt. And while the people in the middle part of the Corn Belt think everywhere is wet, over in the eastern part of the Corn Belt, it's running a little dry. We're a little dry over in that area. I heard a report, for those of you doing corn, that parts of Ohio may be tasseling corn next week. So wish we were that close to that point. I've got a head nod up here, so they must have heard the same report. Oh, and we can't do that. So, okay, let's skip the next one. All right, let's look at some trends and put this in a little bit larger perspective in the way of what we're seeing recently. This is a plot of average South Dakota precipitation since from 1895 till 2012. So we got all of 2012 in here. Each one of the dots is the statewide average precipitation. The blue line just connects the dots. The green line is kind of a running average, and then the red line is an overall trend. We've talked about this various times, but obviously the overall trend is towards increasing precipitation. Quite variable, as you can tell. We've had that recently, wet throughout the 90s, semi-dry in the 2000s based on year and based on location in the state. Here westward were probably the worst parts in the 2000s. The eastern part of the state, what? Oh, we can do that too. 2000s, wet last 4 to 5 years, and then this very rapid drop off from wet to dry. But what has kind of happened is what we kind of thought going in, is that if you look in the middle of every one of these wetter periods, there was at least one dry year in the middle of that. And we hadn't really had a dry year in the middle of this wet period. Last year we had it in spades. Very obviously very dry, but we've recovered pretty significantly now too. So we've largely improved our conditions, but again, the overall trend is towards more precipitation. That's why you guys are in the middle part of the state have really been a beneficiary of part of this, because it has increased your viability of some different crops, or a little more flexibility on crops than you used to have before. Putting this in a different perspective, here we're in Hughes County. This is average temperature, average annual temperature, zoomed in, and this is from a data set called PRISM. Yeah, it's a spatial data set. Laura likes to use this one, so we put this together, looking at the overall changes in precipitation and where we've ended up, or where we look. Last year quite warm. Hughes County would be about the 4th warmest on record according to this, and quite a change from where we were the last 4 to 5 years, even warmer than a number of the years we had in the 2000s. A large part of that was due to last spring and last winter. Relatively warm last winter, very warm last spring. And I guess that's part of the context too. We also want to talk about is where this spring was compared to last spring. How many of you remember last spring? A little different? And it has good and bad points. Early field work also set us up for some problems early because of the early crop water use. We've obviously this year had delayed our crop water use quite a bit. Hughes County, zoomed in on that precipitation, total precipitation annual. You can see again that overall increase in precipitation, quite a bit of a fall off, quite dry, but when we compare with like some of the 30s and some of the previous ones, we still weren't too bad overall in the way of precipitation. This is, oh, do you want to talk about this one?
Okay. So this is a standard index that we use to monitor drought, for example, taking into account precipitation and evapotranspiration. So it uses temperature and precipitation. The blue sides are the wetter sides. The red lines are the drier years. So you can see 2012, obviously a significant drought year. But I think we've really been spoiled by the last, couple decades of wetter conditions, as we've seen. Some of the old timers will say, "Oh, I remember that 2012 drought wasn't so bad." But for us younger folks, it was dry compared to what we know in our career or lifetime. And this is for Hughes County annual average. Yeah.
We compare it to like the 76. Coming from Iowa, I talked about the drought last year compared to 88, and people are saying, no, not 88, 76. So here's where you compare to 76, and then obviously similar to some of the Dust Bowl years of the 30s.
Yeah, looking at further south, like in the Winter, Tripp County area, the drought of 2012, using this index as a single-year drought, most compared to 1934, which is the drought of record. So depending where you are in the state, 2012 was very bad or not so bad. That's just the spring, if you want to talk about it.
Okay, let's go on. We're short of time here. Okay, all right. Let's kind of get us up to date here on a little more current conditions and what we can say about what's going ahead for the rest of the year. When we're talking, looking in the way of outlooks, we'll often talk about El Nino or La Nina, not because it's the end-all and be-all of everything, but because it does give us a little better idea of what's happening in the way of an outlook, what might be happening. So what we're watching here is the Pacific Ocean, and these are sea surface temperatures in the Pacific Ocean. Areas that are blue are colder than average. Areas that are in red are warmer than average. So watching this area in the eastern Pacific is where we're looking for El Nino, La Nina. And you see some colder water, which would typically be considered potential La Nina territory, but we don't have corresponding warmer than average water over here, which we need to have along with that. It's kind of a seesaw thing. One has to be warm, one has to be cold. So what that's meaning is that even though we're a little colder than average there, we're still hinting on what's called neutral conditions, or one climatologist called La Nada, meaning neither El Nino or La Nina. And that's likely going to stay for us through the summer. We're far enough along that this should not have an impact on us. We'll keep an eye on it as we head towards fall and winter, but it's not going to be impacting the outlooks. Other forecasters will talk about this, but El Nino, La Nina doesn't appear to be one that's going to be impacting us as we're going along at this point. Looking at some of the outlooks, what some of the outlooks are saying for us. Okay, this is a forecast. This is from one of the forecast models. How much precipitation we can expect to have in the next week. You can see that in South Dakota, we are in this area of, like 1/10 to 1/4 inch kind of thing, meaning that there will be some small chances for thunderstorms here and there, but the chances for precipitation, and especially large amounts of precipitation, is kind of quiet for right now. It's going to move over in the eastern part of the U.S. for the most part. So we're going to talk about this more in a second. More Canadian air coming down, which is cooler and tends to be dry. If you look at forecast temperatures for next week, we're looking in the low 70s and 80s. So we're going to have a time for crops to take advantage of the moisture that they do have and running with that at this point. The 8 to 14 day outlooks takes the next step along after the next week. This is for temperature, and these are now giving probabilities for temperature and precipitation. So we are in what's called, in the white area, near normal temperatures or forecast for the week after. This would be the 5th through the 11th of July. Off to our west and to our north has a higher probability of being warmer than average, while there's this cold bubble to our south, much cooler than average. What we're seeing setting up is going to be a ridge of high pressure out here that's going to push the jet up into Canada, something like this. So the firefighters out west are going to have some more problems. It's going to be relatively dry for them, but then bringing colder air down out of Canada for at least the early part of July. From a precipitation standpoint, that air out of Canada also gives us lesser chances for precipitation. It doesn't look like we're going to shut off completely, but our chances for precip are going to become less. So that through the early part of the month, near normal temperatures to maybe a little cooler and drier is probably going to be the case right now. Again, it doesn't look like we're going to shut off completely, but this is typically when we fall off climatologically on precipitation anyway, and it looks like even a little bit more than that. Let's skip by those. The overall July outlook, the 30-day outlook for July, this will be updated today? Today or Monday? No, this would, yeah. There'll be an update to this either today or Monday. I'm not sure which. But it's keeping a similar pattern. This is temperature here. So warmer than average is more likely to our west and to our south, whereas we're in the white area called EC, or equal chances. And well, actually on both these we're EC, equal chances for temperature and precipitation. The big reason for that is because the indicators on outlooks for the 30 days and somewhat for the 90 days, they're all over the place. The computer models are all over the place. The tools that they use for guidance are all over the place. So, you know, when you don't have good guidance one way or the other, that's why they go with this EC. That means you got an equal chance for below or above average temperatures. You know, we might have a little hint of warm just to the southwestern part of the state, but not a real strong indication on that. And then I mentioned the 30-day, which is July through September. You see we have a little better chance of warmer than average in the southwestern part of the state. The drier part of the state, as we get into the drier part of the season, there is a very strong relationship in the plains between how wet or dry you are and what your temperature is like. So that's really one of the big drivers, along with that ridge setting up over here. So what we're likely going to be seeing is this ridge that I mentioned over the western U.S. is kind of going to stay there. So we're going to have more frequent Canadian air, probably not relatively wet. We're probably not going to stay as wet as we have been, but we'll still have some precipitation chances around. The U.S. seasonal drought outlook. This is a map just basically taking the drought monitor and saying what's going to change. This is valid through the end of September right now, and the colors are a little washed out. Basically, into the green area here, where just to our southwest of here is saying chances for improvement, likely drought's going to be removed. We'll see if that pans out or not. I'm not sure. But the brown area in the southwest part of the state is drought is likely to continue, and the reason for that is, you know, they're still in decent drought conditions. This is the dry time of year. We don't see necessarily good chances for precipitation, so it's probably not going to get drought removal. Spring is our time where we do better anyway. Why? Why would we expect to improve in drought in the spring? We get more precip, temperatures are cooler. It's a chance to refill the soil moisture profile. So we expected some recovery this spring, just not quite the significance that we saw.
Oh, before you skip.
Yep, go.
I just wanted to mention that there's a new map that will start to be released the 30th of this month. So early next week, you'll start to see a monthly drought outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, the same group that puts this out. So in addition to the seasonal that goes 3 months out, they're also putting out a monthly outlook at the end of every month if you're looking at drought, for example. Hopefully
we won't have to look at this for too much more. Hopefully we can recover in the western part of the state the rest of the way, but it's good to have that guidance along with. Okay? Okay. All right, kind of summary. You know, wet conditions in the middle part of the Corn Belt have really impacted things. Wet and cold here has delayed us some, but obviously the wet was welcome. And Laura was right, the cooler spring reduced our evaporative potential, our crop water use, so it allowed more of the moisture to go in the ground. Drought conditions in the western part of the state, especially the southwest, are the most prevalent. We've really wiped out drought conditions in the eastern part of the state. We've got the Big Sioux River flooding now. The Jim is flooding some, so we've really removed most of our soil moisture and long-term issues. Hinting at La Nina right now, but I don't think it's going to be an impact over the growing season. Our crop development, you know, we've had some delayed crop development. That's leveling out right now. For those of you that track corn and beans and issues with that, I think a large part of the Corn Belt is going to do pretty well this year, but they're going to be watching very closely what's happening in the way of heat getting us through the rest of the growing season. We should watch that here too in the way of crop development for some of those longer season crops. If we stay on the cool side because of the late season, we could push things closer to first freeze. We can't tell when the first freeze is going to be coming right now. We'll keep an eye on that and start putting out more information when the chances might be coming. But right now, we just can't say anything about when a first freeze might be coming. I don't think it's going to be a problem, but it's worth keeping an eye on. Okay, any questions about any of that part for Laura or myself? Other things or thoughts or concerns you have? Okay, if things like this are pieces of information for you that you'd like to hear about, we were coordinating with other state climatologists, other climate service folks, USDA National Drought Mitigation Center, and NOAA folks doing a monthly webinar with an update, basically kind of what we're doing right now, but very focused on what the current conditions are and what the outlooks are going to be. They're the third Thursday of each month. That's when the new outlooks are released at 1 p.m. So the next one is July 18th at 1 p.m. Who's Central? Yeah, Central. Who's doing that? Yeah, Brian Fuchs, National Drought Mitigation Center at the University of Nebraska is doing this one. They are free, open to anybody. You do have to go sign up. So if you want to write this down, you can do that. If you want to sign up and you don't want to write this down, we'll give you our emails at the end. Send us an email, we'll send you the link. They all are also archived. The slides and the presentation are archived, so you can go back and look at them later too.